Hi Joe, how are you doing today?
Hi, Stefan. Yeah, good to meet you.
Yeah, you too. I'm really enjoying the show. I mean, I say show, the series. I mean, there's something about this particular case that has always fascinated and chilled audiences. It's always fascinated and chilled me. What do you think it is about this story that has just tapped into something?
Hmm. I think there's I remember it from I think I was 15 in 1977, 14, 15, and it was front page of the Daily Mirror, which was at the time the biggest selling newspaper in the UK. Um, and I think it was the fact that these events were happening in an ordinary council house in a street in North London. It wasn't happening in a castle or in some sort of Victorian country house. This was in a place that that might be anyone's house. And I guess the second side of it was the extent to which it was documented, and the sort of sheer number of witnesses and the kind of authority given to those witnesses. So police officers, doctors, physicists. There's a whole set of sort of testimony around the case that seems very convincing, just because of the status of those that reported on it.
And because also, I mean, I was going to ask about. I mean, your career is littered with such a fascinating array of stories as a kind of documentary filmmaker. And just wondered, how and when do you decide on your next subject? Because your approach has always been quite broad. You cover such a wide range of different sort of styles or stories. So I wondered what makes one stand out from the millions of stories out there. What makes you go, okay, this is going to be my next project?
So I think you're right. There is quite a big range of subject matter, and I guess that's partly like you come off one project and you really want to. One of the great sort of privileges and sort of joys of documentary making is this immersion that you get in an area of life where you talk to those that both experience it and are expert in it, and you kind of learn about the world, and that's a joyous thing to do. So rather than after the Making Sour Grapes, which was about fraudulent wine, I've been offered, I don't know, 10, 20 wine films, but absolutely that's not what I want to be doing. I think I think there's probably a common area across them all, which is about the reality out there, however we might perceive it, and the realities that are going on in our heads, and the difference between the imaginary and the real. And I guess all documentaries to a certain extent are about how do we know the world, how do we know when something is true or not. So for me, this story had a lot of possibilities to think through and play with that idea, because what we had was 200 hours of tape recordings actually recorded in the house at the time, where Maurice Grosse had sort of set his tape recorder running, often for just hours, kind of hearing family life, but also hearing these strange sounds, and then interviewing people afterwards. And then the possibility of what we decided to do was sort of essentially rebuild the house and play those sounds within that rebuilt set with actors who were lip syncing those situations, so that you could end with a series where it's like the audio is authentically real, insofar as archive can be seen as that, and the pictures are like layers of interpretation on top of that. And I like that kind of contradiction and where that places an audience, and it's really appropriate as a style to look at ghosts and the supernatural, because it kind of is both, there's both a sort of the facts you can't quite reach, and the stories that people layer on top of them.
Yeah, there's something about old audio that's just quite eerie as well, isn't
Yeah,
it?
for sure. And that strange thing of, I mean, there was obviously a temptation to sort of try and clean up the tapes a lot. And we cleaned them up a bit, because Morris was not the greatest sound recordist. He would like leave his cassette recorder or reel to reel like in the distant corner of a room as conversations were going on, the other side of the room. But it felt to me actually that consciousness of the hiss of the 70s audio somehow makes it all fit. Yeah, I guess it's what the brain does with things that are, it leaps in to fill the gaps.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if in sort of 50 years' time, our audios and our tapes from today could be considered quite eerie as well in some ways. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe it'll be like the two-dimensionality of them, that sort of people, maybe we'll be in a much more holographic kind of media world, and people will go, how weird it was that people just looked at this stuff on a screen.
I mean, there was, I mean, you mentioned before you had hours upon hours of footage, both audio, visual, to kind of go through and sort of collate. And I just wondered about what your process was going through and deciding what to keep in and how.
So, I mean, the events unfold over 18 months, and those 18 months had, I felt, listening to the tapes and hearing people's stories about it, a kind of pattern to them. And partly that was a pattern that is the pattern of poltergeists, the way poltergeists have been reported for centuries, which is starting with kind of knocks and furniture appearing to move and moving into sort of people being thrown around and voices and so forth, and other kind of apparently paranormal effects. And so partly there was this escalation that we wanted to follow with the case, but there was also an escalation in terms of the response to the case. So there are the events that happen, but then the house is descended upon by the media, by ghost hunters, by scientists who are all interested in the evidence it might provide for their own particular theories, and that of course has its own effect on the people in the house. And so I suppose in selecting things, it was partly keeping an eye to that escalation of the events, and partly those scenes which really told us about psychologically the sort of dynamics between people and what might be going on for them, and how that in a way might contribute to the poltergeist, I guess. Yeah.
And I was going to ask too, I mean, because of the way you kind of presented it, I mean, I love this kind of hybrid between doc and kind of drama, but it obviously required lots of lip syncing. Did that then require a lot of takes? Because that's a very fine art, isn't it, to get.
It was I mean, we sort of hit on this as an idea without really kind of thinking through what a technical process it is, because obviously you hit the shoot and you've got to have all of your bits of audio completely cut and spaced, and then you're trying to work out how to block those within a scene, and often the tape is telling you things that you didn't realize maybe on first listen. It's like, oh, that person must be over there, or I think they must cross the room at this time, or so it's almost like the tape starts directing the series, the audio starts directing it. And I think I mean, the actors did an incredible job of preparing lip sync wise. I think maybe for the younger TikTok generation it was easier than for the older generation, but you're taking away like one of the key tools of an actor, which is how they say a line, and their intonation, and instead of working like from the inside out, it's almost like they have to work from the outside in. They have to deduce everything from what they're saying. So yeah, fascinating process, kind of amazing job done by the actors involved, but a very technical one, very, very sort of like, it was totally unlike any other documentary experience I've had, where it's a much more fluid, small crew, responsive to a situation way of working. This was like, today we're doing these minutes and this bit of audio.
Yeah, I guess in some ways you were really directing actors in a way that perhaps you haven't quite done as much before. Did it give you a bit of a, I don't know, did it entice you maybe to one day try your hand at more of a kind of dramatic narrative feature outside of the world of documentary?
I don't think I'm at my great age. I'm not a director who's doing docs on a way to making fictions. I love the documentary space. I love the possibilities of the form, which seem to me kind of unlimited because of that thing that you're dealing with reality, but you're dealing also with people's perceptions and stories about reality. And that's like a place where kind of anything goes to a certain extent, so long as you stay true to the source material and the source events, which is your sort of guiding light in it all. So no, I mean, but it was it was great realizing, I think for the first week, we had a 40-day shoot. I think for the first week I was like so frustrated with this massive machine around us, and it was so different from making a doc. You couldn't just say, oh, that's interesting, let's shoot that. It was like you had to stay on the track. And then I kind of got used to the idea, first of all, that this machine was kind of on your side, but you just had to sort of steer it gently in the right direction. And what every one of the crew, but also particularly the actors, brought to it, so the actors would bring understandings about the character that I hadn't necessarily got to because my attention was elsewhere, and that was a fantastic experience. Yeah.
So my final question is, and I think you probably know what I'm going to ask here, but you went through 200 hours or so of footage. After all of that, did you come up with a stance on
I think if I say my stance, and I'm not even sure that I have one, actually, I'm sort of filled with doubt about both possible explanations. They're all flawed. I think if I said a very firm stance, that would diminish the audience's experience in some way. So I won't. But I mean, I certainly, I ended up kind of skeptical of the skeptics and not wholly believing the believers.
I think that's a good place to be.
Yeah.
Agnostic towards it, I suppose.
Exactly. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Jerry, and best of luck with the release. I can't wait to. I've watched 3 episodes. I've still got one left.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, number 4 is an interesting one. It kind of explodes out in a different way. Yeah.
Brilliant. I can't wait. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Cheers.
All right. Cheers, Stefan. Yeah. Bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys.
Hey, you guys!
Hey, you guys!
Hey, that's what they all say.
Hey, you guys!
Hey!